The dryer's heat had chewed through the silk fabric like acid, leaving a gaping hole where the label should have been. Nina stared at the incriminating piece of cloth, her mind racing with the implications. This wasn't just any label. It was the custom-made tag that identified her husband as a KGB operative. The man she'd shared a bed with for the past 2 decades was her sworn enemy. Hands trembling, Nina quickly gathered the ruined garment, cursing her carelessness. How could she have let this happen? Their carefully constructed facade, the loving marriage that had provided perfect cover for their covert activities, was now in jeopardy. She needed to find Alexei, to warn him. But where was he? Probably at the safe house, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from Moscow. Nina hurried through the bustling streets of Tel Aviv, weaving between pedestrians and ignoring the curious glances her obvious distress drew. As she approached the nondescript apartment building, a sense of dread settled in the pit of her stomach. What if Alexei had already discovered the truth? Would he kill her on sight? Ruthlessly eliminate the Mossad agent he'd been hunting for years? Steeling herself, Nina slipped inside and raced up the stairs, adrenaline surging. She burst through the door, prepared to fight for her life, only to find Alexei sitting calmly at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of strong black coffee. "You're early," he remarked, glancing up with a faint smile. "I wasn't expecting you for another hour." Nina's heart pounded in her ears as she searched his face for any sign of suspicion or hostility. "There's been a complication," she said, forcing herself to sound casual. "My blouse, the one with the custom label, it's been ruined in the wash." Alexei's brow furrowed, and for a terrifying moment Nina thought he'd seen through her ruse, but then comprehension dawned on his features, and he let out a low chuckle. "Ah, I see. That's a shame. I quite liked that blouse on you." Exhaling slowly, Nina allowed herself to relax, at least slightly. "We need to be more careful," she said, sitting across from him. "This could have been disastrous." "It's a risk we've always known we'd have to take," Alexei replied, reaching across the table to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. "But we're good at what we do, Nina. We've been doing this for 20 years, and no one has ever suspected a thing." Nina nodded, then leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "We need to accelerate our exit strategy. The tension between our countries is escalating, and I can't shake the feeling that our luck is about to run out." Alexei's expression darkened, and he released her hand, drumming his fingers on the tabletop. "I've been thinking the same thing. The KGB is tightening its grip, and Mossad is getting more aggressive. We may not have much time left." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their predicament hanging thick in the air. Then, Alexei reached across the table and took Nina's hand, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that these past 20 years have been the happiest of my life," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are the only person I've ever truly loved, Nina, and I will do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it means betraying everything I've ever known." Nina felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she squeezed his hand, her own feelings of loyalty and devotion warring with the knowledge that they were sworn enemies, bound by duty to their respective nations. In the end, all that mattered was the connection they had forged, the life they had built together, and the promise to stand by each other, no matter the cost. Chapter 2. The KGB Operative. The air in the safe house was thick with tension as Nina and Alexei discussed their precarious situation. Their covert 2-decade-long marriage, a cover for their roles as enemy spies, now hung by a thread. Nina's hand trembled slightly as she squeezed Alexei's, the gravity of their predicament weighing heavily on them both. The Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West had reached a critical juncture, and the intelligence services of both sides were locked in an intense game of cat and mouse. Their target was Yuri Ivanov, a high-ranking KGB operative who had been a thorn in the side of Mossad, Israel's renowned intelligence agency, for years. Ivanov was a master of deception, having infiltrated the upper echelons of the Israeli government and military. He had been systematically gathering sensitive information and passing it back to his handlers in Moscow, posing a serious threat to Israel's national security. The geopolitical stakes could not be higher. The Soviet Union was flexing its muscles, seeking to expand its influence in the Middle East and undermine the West's strongest regional ally, Israel. Ivanov's intelligence coup could tip the strategic balance, leaving Israel vulnerable to a crippling Soviet onslaught. Nina and Alexei's mission was to neutralize Ivanov before he could do irreparable damage. As deeply embedded moles within the Soviet and Israeli intelligence communities, respectively, they were uniquely positioned to take him down. But the risk was tremendous. If their cover was blown, they would be branded as traitors, facing execution by their own governments. The couple knew that their time was running out. The KGB was tightening its grip, and Mossad was growing increasingly aggressive in its pursuit of Ivanov. They had to act quickly, before the noose around their necks became too tight to escape. "We need to accelerate our exit strategy," Nina said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Once Ivanov is taken care of, we need to disappear, for good." Alexei nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Agreed. I've already made the necessary arrangements."
"We have a boat waiting for us in Haifa, ready to take us to a safe haven in Greece." "And Ivanov?" Nina asked, her eyes narrowing. "I've been tracking his movements," Alexei replied, his tone grim. "He's scheduled to attend a high-level meeting of KGB operatives in Tel Aviv tomorrow night. It's our best chance to strike." Nina's heart raced as she considered the gravity of their plan. Eliminating Ivanov would be no easy task, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. But they had no choice. The fates of their countries and their own lives hung in the balance. "How do you propose we proceed?" Nina asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Alexei leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. "We'll need to move quickly and decisively. I'll infiltrate the meeting, get close to Ivanov, and eliminate him. You'll provide support from the outside, ensuring our escape route is clear." Nina nodded, her mind already running through the details of the operation. "I'll coordinate with my Mossad contacts, make sure the safe house is secure, and the getaway vehicle is ready. We need to be in and out before the KGB even realizes what's happened." The couple fell silent, the weight of their task heavy on their shoulders. They knew that this could be their last mission together, their final chance to escape the web of deception they had woven over the past 2 decades. As the sun began to set outside the safe house, Nina and Alexei shared a lingering glance, silently acknowledging the risks they were about to take. They had come too far to turn back now, and they would do whatever it took to protect each other, even if it meant betraying everything they had ever known. Tomorrow, they would face Yuri Ivanov, the KGB's most dangerous operative, and in the end, only one side could emerge victorious. Chapter 3: The Mossad Strike. The next morning, Nina and Alexei enacted their meticulously planned operation to eliminate the KGB's prized asset, Yuri Ivanov. Nina began by transforming her appearance at a local salon, applying a dark wig and expertly applied makeup to completely alter her look. Wearing a simple black dress and carrying a modest handbag, she now resembled an unassuming middle-aged businesswoman. Her cover story was that of a widow attending a funeral in the city. Meanwhile, Alexei made his own preparations at the safe house. He donned a dark suit, slicking his hair back and adopting the mannerisms of a confident middle management type. As he studied himself in the mirror, he barely recognized the man staring back. Gone was the casual, relaxed persona he had cultivated for their domestic life. In his place was Yuri Ivanov's trusted lieutenant, a ruthless KGB operative with a sterling reputation. Once ready, the couple departed the safe house separately, taking different routes to their rendezvous point, an inconspicuous cafe a few blocks from the hotel where the KGB meeting was scheduled to take place. Nina arrived first, securing a table near the entrance and ordering a simple coffee. Alexei joined her moments later, casually taking the seat opposite and engaging her in idle chatter. "The funeral arrangements are all set," Nina murmured, her eyes downcast. "It should be a small, private affair, just as you requested." "Excellent," Alexei replied, his voice low and gruff. "I appreciate you handling the details. Yuri will be pleased to know everything is in order." The two continued their performance, maintaining the facade of a grieving widow and her husband's associate. All the while, their eyes constantly scanned the cafe, monitoring the comings and goings of potential threats. As the meeting time approached, Alexei excused himself, slipping out of the cafe and hailing a taxi. Nina remained behind, sipping her coffee and appearing lost in thought. In the backseat of the cab, Alexei pulled a small communications device from his pocket, discreetly activating it to establish a secure link with Nina. "I'm on my way," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Keep an eye on the entrance and let me know if you see anything out of the ordinary." "Copy that," Nina replied, her own words nearly inaudible. "I'll be ready to provide support when you need it." Alexei's taxi pulled up to the hotel, and he quickly made his way inside, expertly navigating the bustling lobby. He located the conference room where the KGB meeting was being held and slipped through the door, blending seamlessly with the other attendees. Ivanov was seated at the head of the table, surrounded by a dozen of his most trusted operatives.
Alexei took a seat near the back, maintaining a respectful distance as the meeting commenced. He listened intently, his mind cataloging every detail, every shift in body language, every nuance of the conversation. As Ivanov droned on about the latest intelligence reports, Alexei waited patiently for the opportune moment. Finally, the KGB operative stood to address the room, his back turned to Alexei. With lightning-fast reflexes, Alexei withdrew a slender syringe from his pocket and surged forward, plunging the needle into the base of Ivanov's neck. The KGB operative let out a surprised gasp, his limbs going limp as the potent neurotoxin took effect. Alexei caught Ivanov's body, easing him to the floor as the other attendees erupted into chaos. Slipping back into the crowd, Alexei calmly exited the room, his heart pounding in his ears. Outside the hotel, Nina stood watch, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. As Alexei emerged, she quickly fell into step beside him, their movements in perfect sync. "It's done," Alexei murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ivanov is neutralized." Nina's lips curved into a grim smile. "Then let's get out of here. Our boat is waiting." The two spies hurried through the busy streets, disappearing into the chaos of the city.
Their long-awaited escape was finally at hand, but the true test lay ahead. Would they be able to outrun the relentless pursuit of the KGB and Mossad, or would their web of lies and deception ultimately be their undoing? Chapter 4. The Escape. Nina and Alexei hurried through the crowded streets of Tel Aviv, their footsteps quickening with each block they put between themselves and the hotel. Alexei gripped Nina's hand tightly, his eyes darting left and right, searching for any sign of pursuit. "We need to move faster," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the din of the city. "The KGB will be swarming the area any minute." Nina nodded, her mind racing. They had executed their plan flawlessly, eliminating the elusive Yuri Ivanov, but the true test lay in their ability to escape undetected. If the KGB caught wind of their operation, they would be hunted relentlessly, with no quarter given. As they approached the docks, Alexei suddenly pulled Nina into a narrow alleyway, pressing her against the rough brick wall. "Stay close and keep quiet," he breathed, his body shielding hers from view. Moments later, a squad of KGB agents rushed past, their faces set in grim determination. Nina held her breath, her heart pounding in her ears. If they were discovered, there would be no mercy. Once the agents had disappeared, Alexei took Nina's hand again, his grip like iron. "We need to move, now. The boat is waiting." They emerged from the alley and hurried toward the docks, weaving through the bustling crowds. Nina's eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign of trouble, but the port seemed eerily quiet. "Something's not right," she murmured, her brow furrowing. "Where are the security guards?" Alexei's gaze narrowed. "It's a trap. They must have anticipated our escape route." Without warning, a hail of gunfire erupted from the shadows, forcing the couple to dive for cover behind a stack of crates. Bullets ricocheted around them, splintering the wood and kicking up clouds of dust. "Mossad," Alexei growled, his hand reaching for the concealed weapon at his waist. "They must have been tipped off." Nina's mind raced as she tried to formulate a plan. They were pinned down, with no clear path to the boat, and the KGB would be closing in from the other direction, trapping them in a deadly crossfire. Glancing around, Nina's eyes fell upon a stack of heavy cargo containers, their rusted metal sides offering a potential escape route. "Alexei, follow me," she hissed, grabbing his sleeve and pulling him forward. The couple crouched low, darting from one container to the next, their movements quick and precise. The Mossad agents seemed to have lost their position, their gunfire becoming more sporadic and desperate. As they reached the end of the row, Nina spotted a small opening between two of the containers, just wide enough for them to squeeze through. "This way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexei hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the area. "Are you sure?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "Trust me," Nina replied, her gaze unwavering. Without another word, the couple slipped through the narrow gap, their bodies pressed close together as they navigated the tight space. The air was thick with the scent of rust and diesel, and the sound of their ragged breathing echoed in the confined corridor. Suddenly, a bright light pierced the darkness, and Nina felt Alexei stiffen beside her. "They found us," he hissed, his hand reaching for his weapon. But before he could react, a familiar voice called out, "Hold your fire. It's me." Nina's heart leapt as a figure emerged from the shadows, their features barely visible in the dim light. "Avner," she breathed, relief flooding her voice. The Mossad agent stepped forward, his face etched with a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to get you out of here, now. The KGB is closing in, and I don't know how long we can hold them off." Alexei's grip on his weapon relaxed, and he nodded, his expression grim. "Then let's move. We don't have much time."
The three spies hurried through the maze of cargo containers, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. As they neared the edge of the port, the sound of sirens pierced the air, signaling the arrival of the KGB. Nina glanced at Alexei, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and resolve. "This is it," she murmured. "No turning back now." Alexei squeezed her hand, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm with you, Nina, until the end." Together they raced toward their final destination, their hearts pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and dread. The fate of their decades-long deception hung in the balance, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. As the sirens grew louder, the three spies disappeared into the night, their shadows merging with the darkness and leaving behind the chaos of the port. Chapter 5. The Fallout. As the three spies disappeared into the night, the chaos of the Tel Aviv port erupted into full-blown pandemonium. Sirens wailed, KGB agents swarmed the docks, and Mossad operatives engaged in a frantic game of cat and mouse. Alexei and Nina clung to Avner as he led them through the maze of cargo containers, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The adrenaline coursing through their veins was tempered by the weight of their actions. They had eliminated one of the KGB's most valuable assets, and now they faced the consequences. "Where are we going?" Alexei whispered, his voice strained. "A safe house," Avner replied, his pace never slowing. "We need to get you two out of the city before the KGB catches up." Nina felt a chill run down her spine. "What about the boat? Our escape plan?" Avner's jaw tightened. "Compromised. We'll have to find another way out of the country." The trio emerged from the maze of containers and quickly made their way to a nondescript sedan parked nearby. Avner ushered them into the back seat, his eyes constantly scanning the area for any sign of pursuit. As the car sped through the winding streets of Tel Aviv, Nina turned to Alexei, her expression etched with a mix of fear and resolve. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexei reached for her hand, his grip firm. "We disappear," he murmured. "We've done what we set out to do, and now we need to vanish before the KGB and Mossad come crashing down on us." Nina felt a surge of panic. "But what about our plan, our new life in Greece?" Alexei's gaze hardened. "That's gone, Nina. We've been compromised, and we're running out of options." The car came to a stop in front of a modest apartment building, and Avner turned to face them, his expression somber. "This is where we part ways," he said, his voice low. "I've arranged for a safe passage out of the country, but you'll need to move quickly." Nina's heart sank. "You're not coming with us?" Avner shook his head. "I have to stay and clean up the mess you two have made," he said, his tone tinged with regret. "The KGB and Mossad will be searching for you, and I need to throw them off your trail." Alexei nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Thank you, Avner. For everything." The Mossad agent offered a grim smile. "Good luck, my friends. May your new life be a long and peaceful one." With that, Avner ushered them out of the car and into the apartment building, disappearing back into the night. Nina and Alexei stood in the dimly lit lobby, their hearts pounding. "What now?" Nina asked, her voice trembling. Alexei wrapped her arms around her, pulling her close. "Now we run," he murmured. "We run and never look back." The couple ascended the stairs, their steps quickening with each floor. As they reached the top, a nondescript door swung open, and a gruff-looking man motioned them inside. "You need to move, now," the man said, his voice hushed. "The KGB will be swarming this place any minute." Nina and Alexei hurried through the door, stepping into a sparsely furnished safe house. The man closed the door behind them, locking it securely. "There's a car waiting for you in the alley," he said, handing Alexei a set of keys. "It'll get you to the border, but after that, you're on your own." Alexei nodded, his expression grim. "Thank you." The man turned to leave, but Nina reached out, grabbing his sleeve. "What about the KGB?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "What will happen to you?" The man offered a wry smile. "Don't worry about me, sweetheart. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." With that, he slipped out the door, leaving Nina and Alexei alone. Alexei pulled Nina close, his embrace fierce and protective. "We need to go, Nina," he murmured. "There's no time to waste." Nina nodded, her hearts racing. As they made their way to the waiting car, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread.
The consequences of their actions had been set in motion, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. The two spies slipped into the car, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of pursuit. As they sped away from the safe house, Nina couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them, and for the nations they had once sworn to serve. The final chapter would reveal the true historical significance of their actions, the ripples they had set in motion that would shape the course of the Cold War and beyond. But for now, all that mattered was their desperate race to escape, to forge a new life in the face of the gathering storm. Chapter 6: Echoes of the Cold War. As the nondescript sedan sped through the darkened streets, Nina clutched Alexei's hand, her knuckles white with tension. The weight of their actions hung heavy in the air, the consequences of their decades-long deception still unfolding. Glancing out the window, Nina watched the familiar cityscape of Tel Aviv fade into the distance, replaced by the vast, empty expanses of the Israeli countryside. It was a familiar path, one they had traversed countless times during their covert missions, but this time the journey felt different, more final, more irreversible. Beside her, Alexei stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. For the first time in their 2-decade marriage, Nina felt a profound sense of uncertainty about their future. The carefully constructed facade they had built, the roles they had so expertly played, had all come crashing down in a matter of hours. "Where are we going?" Nina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexei glanced at her, his eyes reflecting a mix of resolve and trepidation. "The border," he replied, his tone grim. "From there, we'll have to find our own way to safety." Nina nodded, her mind racing with the implications. The KGB and Mossad would be hunting them relentlessly, their every move scrutinized and dissected. Escape would not be easy, and the consequences of failure were unthinkable. As the car crossed the border into Jordan, Nina felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The familiar terrain of their homeland had been replaced by the unfamiliar, the unknown, a metaphor for the precarious position they now found themselves in. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Alexei reached across the seat, taking her hand in his. "We disappear," he said, his gaze unwavering. "We start over, somewhere far from the reach of the KGB and Mossad. A fresh start, a new life. That's the only way we'll survive." Nina felt a pang of sorrow, a deep longing for the life they had once known. The comfortable apartment in Tel Aviv, the familiar routines, the illusion of normalcy, all of it had been shattered, reduced to ashes by the fallout of their final mission. "And the KGB?" she asked, her voice tinged with fear. "Ivanov was their prized asset. They'll never stop hunting us."
Alexei's grip tightened around her hand. "Then we'll have to be smarter, more resourceful than they are," he said, his voice tinged with determination. "We've eluded them for 20 years, Nina. We can do it again." As the car pressed on, the landscape around them shifted, the arid desert giving way to lush, verdant hills. Nina knew that they were nearing their next destination, a waypoint on their uncertain journey to freedom. But the weight of their actions continued to loom over them, a constant reminder of the historical significance of their mission. Yuri Ivanov had been the KGB's most valuable asset, a high-ranking operative who had infiltrated the highest echelons of the Israeli government. His elimination had dealt a devastating blow to Soviet intelligence efforts in the region, disrupting their ability to gather sensitive information and undermining their broader geopolitical ambitions. The ripples of their operation would be felt for years, if not decades, to come. The balance of power in the Middle East had been irrevocably shifted, and the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union had intensified, with both superpowers vying for influence and control in the volatile region. For Nina and Alexei, their personal sacrifice had become inextricably linked to the larger struggle between the East and the West, a microcosm of the global conflict that would shape the course of the 20th century. Their defection, if discovered, would be a devastating blow to both the KGB and Mossad, exposing the fragility of their intelligence networks and the vulnerability of their respective regimes. As the car pulled to a stop in a small, nondescript village, Nina and Alexei stepped out, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. They knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, a constant game of cat and mouse as they evaded the relentless hounds of the KGB and Mossad. But in that moment, as they stood together, hand in hand, facing an uncertain future, they were acutely aware of the historical weight they carried on their shoulders. Their actions had altered the course of history, and the consequences of their choices would echo through the ages, shaping the geopolitical landscape for generations to come. With a deep breath, they turned and disappeared into the shadows, their footsteps fading into the night, the weight of their legacy etched upon their souls.